Tonight, I am the nerdiest of nerds. I have a PowerPoint and a screaming cat. I apologize for one, but not the other. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who we should be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. She has about 22 years and I have about 24. So tonight we're doing something a little different, and I'm going to send it back over to Cassie to explain it.
Yeah, because I think this was my idea, because our relative experiences are kind of different, because Alicia has a lot of extensive training and experience in music and music theory, whereas I have a lot of extensive training and experience in writing and story structure. For those of you who may not know, I am the author behind the Three Rose City swing productions, Murder Mystery, Swingin' in the Rain, and Happiest Event on Earth. So I'm pretty good with the story structure to entertain people. That's the thing. And we thought it would be fun to not collude in preparing for this episode and both approach analyzing and analyzing piece of solo choreography to Billie Eilish's Bury a Friend, Alicia from the perspective of music and music theory, and me from the perspective of story structure. So, is there anything you want to say before I share the link to the video?
I don't think so. There's three of the same chunk of music of choreography. Watch all three. I think at least Cassie will be talking about the differences. I won't necessarily. I will be talking about just overall.
Yeah.
But yeah, so watch all three.
Yeah, it's really fun. Enjoy, and we are going to have you watch it again at the end of tonight after we've talked about everything, so you can kind of see it with a new lens. So link is in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch, and when you're done we will get to jibber jabbering. I seriously could watch that on loop for hours. I don't know about anyone else. I love that choreography so much, and all of those performances are just so
really
fan-freaking-tastic. And this is the same song that Christopher Dumond and Chantelle Pianetta did for their classic routine. And I think we actually analyzed that with him at one point.
We did.
Yeah. I'll link that above in the recording of this. Yada yada. So Alicia, you want to talk a little bit about music theory?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that fall under the category of music theory. I think the main thing I'm going to focus on tonight, well, there's two things I'm focusing on, really. We've kind of talked about both of them before a little bit, but not in a lot of specifics. I think I've mainly kind of alluded to them or described them outside of the talking about actual music theory, kind of just talking about them vaguely when we're going through certain dances. I know we've done a couple episodes that talk about them, but it's a little bit more broken down today and specific. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is dynamics, and dynamics are just the level of loudness of the music, and it's kind of between notes or phrases. It's always relative, so it's not like a specific thing has oh, you have to be at this level. It's just kind of based on the other pieces of the music. So there is a range, and there are kind of extremes on each side of the range, but just the general range. There is pianissimo, which is very soft, piano, which is soft, mezzo piano, which is moderately soft, mezzo forte, which is moderately loud, forte, which is loud, and then fortissimo, which is very loud. Now, I was talking with Cassie about this beforehand, and I was in choir for a long time, and I learned this in middle school, and my choir teacher would have us say it with her, but at the level of what we're what each is.
Oh no!
So it'd start out pianissimo.
I'm getting piano, getting Sound of Music vibes.
Piano, mezzo forte, and then it ended up with everyone screaming fortissimo.
Amazing.
So that was fun. That's what that reminded me of. Haven't gone over these in a while in my own head.
That's so great. I love that.
Anywho, so there's the different levels, and going between those happens obviously within songs, and generally there's not just one level for the whole song. A lot of times the changes between the different volumes will be between what we know as phrases. So like when the phrase change happens, it will either get louder or quieter and stay that way generally. Not always, but in terms of the way that we look at it as West Coast swing dancers, that's what it's going to be basically. Now, there are two, kind of three, I'm not really talking about the third one, but there are three different like changes in the music. So the crescendo, which is a volume increase. There's a decrescendo, which is a volume decrease. And then there's also a diminuendo, which is, bless you, a diminuendo, which is when the music is diminishing. So I'm not really talking about that, talking about the crescendo and the decrescendo. Now, these can happen over a short period of time or a long period of time, and it varies on like the range of it. Like you can go from like very soft to extremely loud. So like you could go from pianissimo to fortissimo, or you could go from mezzo piano to mezzo forte, right? So it could be a really large range or a very small range, and it can happen over like a whole phrase or a couple phrases, or it could just happen over like a few counts of music. So it varies. In this particular piece that we looked at, the vocals are not doing a ton of changing in and of themselves. The volume change that we're getting is more from the addition of different layers of the music in the background and the, taking away of them. So it's not so much the vocals. And a lot of times it is the vocals. A lot of times that is what it is. Like you will hear whatever singer, you can hear them putting a lot more energy into it at some point or a lot less. A lot of times you can hear that. This isn't particularly that way. Some songs are like that, it's more the energy change from the instrumental in the background. And really, this kind of has, like, it takes away. Like that is kind of what it does for making it very quiet. And it's not so much like there's no instrumental there. It's like it takes away in terms of like, it'll be like hit here, hit here, hit here, instead of like that, 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 that. Like, so it kind of, it does it in different ways. But that's just this particular piece of music. And it also, I'm also talking about it just because it is a short piece of the full music. So it is important to notice that because it's not like there's a full song to look at. In this particular song, it's a longer song in general, but what we looked at was a very short version of it. I'm going to talk though about like the structure of the average song. So generally there's like an intro, and then you'll have a verse or two verses, which will kind of tell the story of the song. So the intro generally is kind of a build-up, and then you have verses, which are the story, and then you have the chorus, which it's about the main theme of the song. So that's what you will hear repeating, like the section of lyrics that you'll hear repeating throughout the song. That's the chorus. And then there is generally a bridge, which is like a variation on the music. It doesn't sound like a verse or the chorus. It's a little bit different. And then there is an outro towards the end. So the general structure would be intro, one verse, two verse, chorus, a third verse, a second chorus, a bridge, a last chorus, and then an outro. And generally the like peak of energy of the song will happen during that last chorus. Like I said, this is just the general structure of a song. it doesn't apply to every song. So you can see kind of it starts with some low energy level. It kind of gradually increases here. Then it dips back down for the third verse. Then we have the chorus and the bridge, and then the last chorus. And you can see this is the highest level of energy. And then the outro kind of dips down and tapers off. I just wanted to share that so you have a good visual. And now this particular piece that we looked at, like I said, because it's short, I wanted to kind of give an idea of what you could take from it, or like what you could compare it to, that wouldn't be the full song. So in terms of the choreography and the music, it would kind of have like an intro and then a verse and a bridge and then a chorus or another verse, depending. Technically, it is the chorus of that song. But anyways, in the sense of what we listen to from it, it could be a chorus or a verse, whatever. And then you have the outro, which is a very short piece at the, I think I'm going to hand it over to you for now. Hopefully that was explanatory enough.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And if anybody has any quick questions about anything Alicia just talked about, feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat real quick. Otherwise, move on to story structure. And I'm so excited that you had that chart, because like this is the nerd part of me getting super excited, because story structure follows a very similar format. Especially when you think about especially when you think about 3-act structure. Tonight I am the nerdiest of nerds. I have a PowerPoint and a screaming cat. I apologize for one but not the other. If you know me, you know which one I'm apologizing for. Okay. Do the PowerPoint. All right, cool. Of course I had a title screen because that's important. I don't know. Yep. It's my high schooler in me that needed to be complete. So first thing I want to talk about is a 3-act structure for storytelling. In the name, it implies there are 3 acts. We have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then right in the smack dab in the middle of Act 2 is a midpoint. Now, as you can see from this kind of rising action and then denouement, this is following the same kind of trending upward and then resolving that Alicia talked about for her musical structure in a song. And this is really important when thinking about musicality, not only when you're doing choreography, but also when you're improvising, like we do so much of the time in West Coast Swing. But before I go that direction, I want to talk a little bit more about Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 in its barest bones, beginning, middle, and end. The beginning, as it says here, it says exposition, because what is so important at the beginning of a story is to get the audience in the car with you before you run off down the road. Because the audience needs to gain shared context to understand what's at stake in the story and who the characters are. If you were to drop right into the middle of, let's say, like this section of the story without having any of the context, it would be meaningless to you and it wouldn't be engaging. So one of the most important things at the beginning of a story is providing that context, hopefully in an entertaining way, but you need to provide exposition so the audience understands what's going on and can care about what's happening. And then the inciting incident happens right before the break from Act 1 into Act 2. And that's usually when everything changes. So that's when, for example, Gandalf shows up at Bag End and is like, hey, that ring you've got, Frodo, we should maybe do something about that. But it's basically, there's an incident that happens that, for the main character at least, there's no turning back. They have to go into the world of the story and achieve their goal or defeat the villain, that kind of stuff. And so this line between Act 1 and Act 2 is usually a boundary between the ordinary world of Act 1, so like Frodo in Bag End versus the incredible world of the story. So, like the journey through Middle Earth. And those two things have to be very different in a story. Otherwise, it gets like very boring very fast. Things have to happen and change and escalate in order to move the story along. Then the midpoint is where the nature of the story often flips on its head. So if we think of E.T., spoiler alert if you haven't seen E.T., um, that in the middle of the movie is where it changes from this kind of sort of horror movie, like there's an alien hanging out in the barn outside that's a little creepy, to at the midpoint where we discover ET is a benevolent alien that's in trouble and we have to get him back home. So the goal changes for Elliot, the main character, the little boy who befriends ET. In the beginning, he's like, there's an alien. What the heck is going on? And then at the midpoint, he learns that getting ET home is his goal, as opposed to what is ET? It's get ET home. And that midpoint shift really takes the story into a whole new direction, but is also an escalation. So the stakes are higher. And then through the rest of Act Two, basically, I love this analogy that a lot of writing teachers use to teach their writing students is like, you send your main character up a tree, then you throw rocks at them. And you make it worse, 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 and worse.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
Oh, really? Wow.
No.
I don't think I've ever been the first person to say that to someone. So this is an exciting moment for me. But basically, right here towards the climax and this break into Act Three is, again, there's a no turning back aspect. We're storming the castle. We're facing the villain. In the third Lord of the Rings film, they're actually going into Mount Doom. No turning back. But then after the main character wins, achieves their goal, or in the tragedy, the tragic events happen, then things resolve and the escalation de-escalates. It chills. You know that feeling when like a movie or a TV show feels like it just ends too soon? It's because you didn't get enough resolution after the climax. And then some movies are like, why is this still going on? It's because you got too much resolution after the climax. It's a very fine balancing act. So now this is basic 3-act structure, and this is how we're going to be looking at this choreography tonight from my perspective. But I also want to share the hero's journey, which was originated by Joseph Campbell. And for those of you Star Wars fans, the original Star Wars A New Hope is heavily based in this kind of story structure. And instead of it being a chart that trends upwards, although you could graph out any hero's journey story on that chart, the hero's journey is more cyclical because it starts in the ordinary world and then the hero returns to the ordinary world with what they have learned from their journey. So it's more cyclical, but we still have 4 quadrants. And for example, this number 8 right here, this is essentially the midpoint that I was talking about in 3-act structure. This point is the break from Act 1 into Act 2. This is the break from Act 3 into Act 4. And it's just a different way of looking at a similar structure, but it has a little bit more specificity to the emotional stakes and occurrences that happen along the way. For this bit of choreography that we all watched, there were 4 phrases of the song, not the entire song like Alicia was talking about, but just only 4 phrases. And that actually breaks out into 3-act structure perfectly because there's 1 phrase per quarter of the song. I'm not going to read the lyrics to you because I might start singing them and nobody wants that.
I mean, it'd be entertaining.
No, this is going up on YouTube. I refuse. But it can be helpful to just skim them really quick to understand what's going on in the lyrics of the song and what the phrasing is for when we move on to the next slide. So I'm going to take a sip of water so y'all can finish reading the lyrics if you so choose. So now this is the first performance of the 3 different performances in the video, and I've broken it down into like the highlights of the beginning and end of each quarter of the story choreography. So at the very beginning, this is the providing the exposition, getting everybody in the car so we have a shared context to understand what's going to happen. And it's very calm, it's very clear, it's very subtle. But then as we move towards the first phrase change, which happens to be the break into act 2, we experience more movement. However, it's the shift between this body roll section right here to this pose. Like this is count 1 of the second phrase.
Mhm.
And the contrast between these 2 moments in the choreography and the performance is huge. We have gone from the ordinary world into the world of the story, aka the world of the choreography, which in this case is this. I just love the aesthetic of any choreography done to this song because Bury a Friend is just such a great song.
It is.
Um, it's so great. And but this choreography wouldn't work if there weren't that kind of contrast to take us from act 1 into act 2.
Yeah.
And then if we think about the midpoint, this is the point where the energy of the music kind of resolves again. So it comes down in energy, comes down in volume. And this is when, right before the midpoint, the performers turn their backs to us as the audience. And we actually get 2 sets of 8 with their backs to us. And the energy just changes and it twists. So it's almost like there's ordinary world. There's like, what the fuck is this? Oh no, I'm the thing I should be afraid of. And it's that shift from like it being outside of you and you reacting to it becoming a part of you and you're the one that everyone should be afraid of. It's this really fun transition. Like the whole concept behind the story and the choreography has kind of flipped on its head. And now you're part of the menagerie of chaos. And it's great. And then similarly, as we go from act 2 into act 3, once again, they've started facing us again in the audience. And this transition right here is really interesting because it's like that storming of the castle moment because we've got the dancer and then we've got this character in the hand and they're separate again and there's this battle between them. And whether you read what happens after that as the main character either defeating that crazy or just taking it as their own and adopting it as part of them is up to you to interpret. But there's this battle right here and there's a resolution to it when she kind of swallows the energy or breathes. Is it a breathe in? It's like a sound.
Yeah.
And then the choreography then resolves to the end. And if you look at this difference between the opening pose and the ending pose, we've kind of come back around to the same energy, but you can tell everything has changed. And that's one of the really key parts of storytelling is change and most importantly, change in character. That's where character arcs get involved.
Mhm.
So I've done the same kind of frame breakdown for each of the 3 performances. So I'm just going to show. I love how this dancer interpreted this this choreography. It
Yeah.
was so great, but he's still selling the contrast in the moments based on how he's interpreting the choreography through his own
Mhm.
style. You're still getting the same beats in the story, even though he's performing it slightly differently than the 3 previous did. And
Mhm.
then similarly, even though we still have the same front runner who is Galen Hooks, who is actually the choreographer of this piece, but the two dancers behind her are different from the first go round. Yeah, that is my PowerPoint. It's short. It's the shortest one I've ever made in my entire life. Hope y'all liked it. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing.
The difference in between the first and third and then the second dancer kind of makes me think of the difference between like a suspense movie and like a horror movie.
It is so great. And so I think this brings me to like, well, how do you like, sure, Cassie, it's great to analyze this after the fact, after the thing has been choreographed, after the thing has been performed, but how the hell do you apply story structure to your actual dancing in the moment if it's improv, or if you're trying to create your own choreography? I don't know. So maybe I did have caffeine. I don't know.
Or something.
I'm a nerd. That is my caffeine. The idea behind providing this extra context to story structure on top of music theory, on top of phrasing and the musicality you have all probably encountered before, is hopefully it'll provide you a deeper context for why slow and steady escalation is really important, whether
Yeah.
you're doing choreography or improv. Like we've talked about a lot on this show, especially for spotlight dances. Those dances where the dancers bring out their A game within the first 8 to 16 counts, those dances aren't going to be as good as the ones where the partnership takes up to 32 counts to really get going. You need to bring the audience into the dance with you and provide that shared context for everyone to go on a journey with you. And that may sound airy-fairy and ambiguous, but in practical terms, it means you need to start with a smaller footprint on the dance floor, smaller movements, less energy, less volume to your dancing, so you have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Additionally, if you, and this tends to be more relevant for choreography, because choreography can be deeply emotional. Wow. Can you tell I haven't done a live show in a while? It can be deeply emotional depending on what you're trying to create with your performance. And something that has frustrated me in the past is seeing performances where the music hasn't even started, but the dancers are already deeply distraught. And as an audience member, you have zero context for why that's happening. Because A, the music hasn't even started yet. And B, there hasn't been any movement to tell you why the dancers are that distraught. And personally, that is automatically a way to distance me from the performance and to not because I don't understand, I cannot care. I want to care, but I don't have the information I need to be able to do that. So when you're choreographing, you need to build that context into the first phrase of your choreography. So something, you have an ordinary world moment first, and then there's an inciting incident that causes that distraughtness.
Yeah.
And then as an audience, you're all just like, you feel punched in the gut, cut through the heart, because you experienced that with the dancers. Then you're in the car together and you can go on the journey together.
Yeah. When anything comes out with like any type of intense emotion, it can be very off-putting, and it can make the audience, be more of an observer instead of, go along with you. And I would even say that it's even important for more of a social dancing aspect, because like if you start out full mid-plan, your partner's not going to be able to go along with you and you're not going to be able to figure it out together. So I think it's extremely important in terms of, social dancing as well. Just want to add that.
Like imagine if you were just suddenly transported halfway through the movie Speed onto that bus with zero warning and zero context. That would be deeply stressful and unenjoyable. You would not want to stick around. But When you watch the movie from the beginning, you're like, oh, you're on the edge of your seat. You're in the story with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. I cannot speak tonight. Anyways, but that being said, the key is change. So you have to have an ordinary world and then an inciting incident. And usually that's right around the ramp up to the first phrase change, depending on how long of an act one you want in your choreography. But that inciting incident needs to change everything. So you could come out super distraught, and then the inciting incident at the phrase change is something super funny. Like if it's a story about a friend that's like really not doing great and the other friend wanting to cheer that friend up, that would be a really engaging story, because at the you'd see at the inciting incident the other dancer trying to cheer up the other. You experience change and it can evolve. But when two dancers come out and they're just super depressed and they stay super depressed the whole time, it's even worse if you don't have existing familiarity with the song. So if it's literally your first time hearing the song and you're getting that choreography, you're like, where am I? You're like that John Travolta meme. I will try to insert that. I'm goofy. Anyways, so context is really important. And then slowly escalating and having those moments of change at the phrase changes, because those are essentially your changes into different acts in story structure. And then you have your peak, your climax, not at the very end, just before the very end. And then you chill out.
I pulled up Chris and Chantelle's routine so that we can send you all to watch it after we rewatch the first one, because I want to pull in the West Coast Swing element to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So shall we have everyone rewatch the solo right now? All right. So considering everything you have learned, go ahead and rewatch the solo performances. Link is in the chat.
Mine is done. I'm going to put the link to Chris and Chantelle's in the chat now.
Right.
So you guys can go watch that. It's a longer version of the song, so hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit more of the progression throughout than with the really short clip of the song. Link is in the chat. Haven't watched that one in a while. So fun.
Same. That was so great. It was really fun watching it again after our discussion tonight. I love how when you have a longer piece like that, you have more time to do that slow trending escalation. Whereas in the solo performance we saw, they only had 4 phrases. So you have to get from beginning, middle, end really quickly. But in a US Open routine, you have more time and you can spend more time in a particular mood, in a particular tone, in a particular feeling before moving on to the next one. You don't have to transition as quickly. And what I particularly love is the way they slowly like really sink into their characters throughout the song. Like they get crazier as the song goes. And that's part of the joy of it. And that's the character arc that we're getting. So while you don't necessarily get like specifics about what is happening in the story, with dancing, it's about creating a feeling in the audience and letting that feeling escalate and then resolve. So
I also want to mention that because you had talked about not coming out, in the middle of a really strong emotion, it feels almost like they did, but really they were just coming out in character at the very beginning, which is very different than already being in a deep emotional state. It was more like you could tell that their characters were very I don't know even how to put that. You could tell what they were trying to get you to feel about the characters, right? It wasn't like they just started out and were expected you to know something.
Like if you had taken their characters right at the climax and that had been what they walked out as, they would have had nowhere to go. So it's about getting the audience in the car with you so they have enough context to care and to enjoy the ride.
I feel like that was a rather detailed episode. So
I know, and fast. It's going to be pretty easy to edit. Tomorrow me is quite excited. We want to pull a call out for your suggestions for videos to analyze on a future episode. So feel free to either DM us or leave them in the comments of this YouTube recording. Speaking to future audiences, we want to analyze what you want us to analyze.
Yeah. Any ideas you might have. So we'll be doing that, I think, in about a month or so.
Yep.
Ish, I think is about when we'll be doing that particular episode. Yeah. So, and if we get, more suggestions, we'll plan to do them down the road as well. So let us know what you want us to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It is nice to be back.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the longest break we've ever had. Yeah, we will be back next week, getting back on the nerdy West Coast swing train.
Yeah.
Starting out strong.
We shall see you all then.
Bye, everybody.
Crescendo is when the music is getting louder. Did you hear my cat sneeze?
That was Angel sneezing? That's amazing. I thought she'd like knock something off of a bookshelf. No, sneeze.
No, that's
just tight, Angel.
Anyways,
Oreo. Oh no. Is he locked in the closet again? Please hold, everyone. I'll leave myself unmuted in case it gets really entertaining. Please hold.
We've taken a break for like 4 or 5 weeks, and apparently everyone has forgotten how this works, including ourselves. Cassie and I were talking beforehand, and we were both like, really had to think about our intro. Haven't said it in a while. I think we nailed it though, so that's fun.
In fact, I don't know how he got past me. I don't. Anyways, back to 3-act structure. I have not ingested caffeine today, I swear. Anyways.
You sure?
Side note, since the last Zoom update, I can see you, Alicia. I'm sharing my screen, and I can see you. It's a whole new world.
That's interesting. I've been able to see you the whole time. Anytime
I know, but it hasn't worked for me. I don't understand. I can't believe I locked Oreo in my closet. So for context, this cream sheet lives in the closet because I want it to stay nice and pristine and, not sleep on it because my bedding is violently purple. Not great for on camera. You'll always have to go into the closet to fetch it. But apparently, that sneaky little bugger just snuck past me tonight and hung out in there.
Yeah. My best friend's cats used to get shut in her pantry from time to time. And she would open the pantry because she would hear meowing, and they'd be really, really high on a shelf. And she's like, how did you get there? Also, how did you get in the pantry without me knowing?